Yo, what's poppin', Bagel Bros, and welcome back to another Patreon rant. If you want one of these, just go to the link down in the description and chuck me $5. Or 10, your choice. Today's rant comes from Neon Manta 6 months ago, because we're still on the old rants grind set, who says, rant about Bo Burnham's Make Happy. So, I just watched it, literally about 10 minutes ago I finished it. This is a sequel to a prior rant of mine where I ranted about Bo Burnham's What, also requested by Neon Manta. Now, this is a rant that could honestly go on for ages, because, I could just list out every single joke I made a note about, because every joke hits, damn near. There are some bits that do feel a bit drawn out, which is something that I didn't feel about the previous comedy show, What, surprisingly. The bit about the fucking near the end, with all the ingredients not fitting on the tacos. I got really sick of that bit, honestly. And it works thematically for the song, but the prior bit about his hand being too big to fit in the Pringles can was already drawn out, and I thought that was a funny sort of drawn out, so to get the same kind of joke 2 times in a row was a bit exhausting, was a bit okay, do we have to do this? And there are a few other bits like that, the bit miming out making the sandwich while drunk. Well, I think he turns it around at the end, arguing with his make-believe girlfriend in this skit. No, it does still go on a bit long before that point. But otherwise, most of the other jokes are just pure comedy gold the entire time. And I've quoted a bunch of them. He starts off the show, doing the call and response shit. And he mixes it up really well. He says, and I have this quoted, "If you can divide by 0, say hell yeah." Then the audience says, "Hell yeah." And he's like, "No, you can't. I don't want Pavlovian fucking responses from you, right? And this needs to be legit." And so he asks a couple more, and he says, "If you like smoking weed, say hell yeah. Hell yeah." And then there's police sirens in the background that immediately start up. "All right, get these motherfuckers. They're smoking pot." That was great. I have not made my mind up about masturbation, because on the one hand, it feels good, and that's the end of the sentence right there. Once again, I could go on forever. If I fuck a kid, I'm a pedophile, but if he fucks me, I'm a pedophile. There's one part where he baits the audience into saying the N-word by doing more call and response shit. Yeah, we like peanut butter, and then, the audience says jelly. And he does that over and over again, then eventually, what types of chips do we like? Salt and vin. And then the audience, some of them get baited, some of them do take the bait, which is based and hilarious. And if Bo Burnham gets canceled for that joke, god damn it, cancel me too, because I thought it was fucking amazing. Let's see, what other notes do I have? The bit where he acts out being in awe of someone's dick at the urinal by pointing the microphone downwards towards the audience. I thought that was great. There's just a lot of miming, and a lot of... Bo Burnham really likes fucking with people's expectations. And so he'll deliberately, have long setups where, he's baiting you into thinking that one thing will happen. And then, just randomly, on a whim, it'll completely, diverge from what you expect. Another example I have here is he has this, super long, dramatic build-up with flashing lights. The lights flash, and you can see him for a second. There's, dramatic music in the background, and it goes on for, a minute, and then he just farts into the fucking microphone. That's the joke. And there's just so many... Oh, dude, okay, I'm glad I have this quoted, because this bit, feels so out of place compared to Bo Burnham's usual style of joke-telling, but I thought it was fucking Alright, sorry about that. Had to go for a second. As I was saying, a bit that feels really different from every other joke in the show, but that I really love, is he goes up to... He says, "What do you think, industrial piping?" And there's like two pipes in the background that have like, one of them blows out steam. And he's like, "Close, you're almost there." Then the other one's, like the other pipe blows out steam. And he's like, "Stay out of it." So, just a bunch of jokes like that. It is very disconnected, very sporadic, which is the same style as What. This is just as start and stop. Like, there's none of the usual comedy stories. I mean, he literally subverts the idea of the comedic story with, "I went to the dentist and then nothing funny happened. Remember to take this out of the show. God damn it, I messed up already." That's, that's an entire bit in the show. And there is a lot of, self-referential stuff like that. It does almost get to a point where it's a little overbearing, where it's like, okay, you don't have to direct, you don't have to call attention to the fact that you're doing a comedy show that frequently, but it is overall a welcome addition. Obviously, the highlight of any Bo Burnham show is the songs, and the first one is Straight White Male. And I guess for this one, it helps to have context into how the show begins, right? So the show begins with a rant about how the world isn't funny. This comedy show is here, but the world is fucked, basically, and we're just here to have a little distraction from it. And that is very much the point of the show. It is framed in such a way that this is a brief 1 hour break from the cruelty of the world, as he says very late on into the show, and one of the second to last song, the final one on stage if you watched it live, is "Look at the skinny white kid with the declining mental health as he attempts to give you what he can't give himself," which is happiness, at least a temporary facsimile of it. And in having so many, he gestures constantly about that declining mental state, because, and granted, this is based off of 5 minutes of reading Wikipedia, but during his tours of What, he was, beginning to have panic attacks before shows, and this is, even What was, very much predicated on, I'm depressed, this is a brief respite from it. But this show, it becomes main text theme of, it's called Make Happy. The point of the show is briefly become happy, because, normally I am not, and most people are not. And so, Straight White Male is essentially a song about guilt. It is about guilt of being privileged. Not necessarily in, the example he gives is the straight white male thing. And obviously it's predicated, it's a comedic rendition of this. But I read it more generally, right? Because even, right before this, he was talking about how, I could have been giving, he has this prop, I forget what it was, but he's that costed $300 right there. I could have just fed the fucking homeless with that, Or no, that was later in the show. The part that I'm thinking of is when he says, this comedy show isn't gonna feed the fucking children starving in Africa. That sort of thing. And this is, a very specific example, but it is, I believe, meant to be read more generally of this comedy thing as a whole, it isn't gonna fix the world, it's just a brief distraction from it. What am I doing with my life? There's this existential dread that is shown in this, I feel. This existential sense of what am I doing? I think he literally does say, "What am I doing here? Why am I here?" At one point in the show. So, it is very much about that. And then most of the other songs afterwards, I was not able to get as much of a concrete, thematic meaning, I guess. I mean, they all do have meanings, but it doesn't necessarily tie into the overall theme of the show as much. Although I do want to go through at least some of the lines in Straight White Male. Like, he's talking about, oh, the gay, or women want rights, and then, he says that 3 different times during the show, right before the chorus, and it's always a different group of people at the end. The gays want kids, ew. Can't you just leave us alone? Also, no to the things you asked for. And then on the second verse, it's the blacks want not to be called the blacks. Sorry! And then it just goes on. And the third verse, I liked this. He said, the African American... It doesn't go with the rhythm. God damn it. Stuff like that. There were a few songs from here that I had heard out of context from the actual show, and this was one of them, and the best bit from this is the Scarecrow bit, where he describes taking off a woman's clothes in her sleep only for it to be a fucking scarecrow again, because he had set that up earlier in the song, and it's really fucking funny. But other than that, it is a pretty straightforward parody of country music, where he's just like, yeah, country music's shit, huh? It's all fake. There is this element recurring throughout the show of, like, fucking showbiz is fake, all this shit is fake, like, everyone just wants your money. Art is dead, basically. Art is dead. Lower Your Expectations is probably my favorite. I fuck with this song so hard. It's so catchy. I've heard it like a dozen times out of context from the actual show. Every bit in it is golden. To relay my favorite bit from the song. Alright, so he sets this up where, he's basically describing, like, the ideal man and ideal woman. And for the ideal man, he's like, you might think that this man only exists in your mind. Well, and then he says, like, well, you're right, he's fake. But then, later on, he said, he's describing the ideal woman, and he's like, you might think that this woman only exists in your mind. Well, she's real, but last week, she died. Which is, once again, the song is ironically called Lower Your Expectations, and he is actively fucking with your expectations with that line, which he is doing throughout the entire show. Because he is just constantly, like, going back and forth, like, setup and denial type stuff. But this is my favorite example of it. Kill Yourself. My problem with this song is that there's just so many asterisks that he has to put in, where he's like, also don't kill yourself. Please don't kill yourself. Please don't take this song seriously. He, like, the entire, like, mid portion of the song is him saying, like, don't actually do this. And then, he goes into some comedic ways to kill yourself, like being gay in Iran. I just, like, even after the song, he says, don't take the song seriously. I feel like the song would have been better if it, like, played it straight throughout the song, and then at the end have the caveat. You only need one caveat, and it can come after the song instead of sandwiched in between 2 really funny verses, with a break to say, don't do this, guys, don't take it seriously. Once again, like, I do think, overall, it is a really good show, but I do think it's less consistent in terms of overall song quality and, the consistency of the bits than What. So it is very slightly less good overall. I think every song in What absolutely hits. Like, What is just so consistent, and that's the thing I admire the most about it. Where, when Kill Yourself hits, it really does hit. It's just that you have to have that line in the middle to be like, don't. The song where he's like, eat a dick, this is another example of the show just being less consistent overall, because although, the ending with lick this clit is just godly, incredible, it is, not as good as a lot of, most of the songs from What. I'd have to go back and look at what all the songs are from that to be reminded, but fucking Sad, From God's Perspective, I don't need to list all the songs from that show, they're all great. I just saw I have this quoted, if you guys are having a good time, make some silence! Cool. That's great. And then there's a bit near the end of the show, right? So as he's wrapping up, we get to sort of the main message of the show overall, as he's had all these, funny bits and whatnot. He has a line that's really impactful to me, which is, if you can live your life without an audience, do it. And this, I've had many a mental breakdowns, I guess, about this. Just that line could be decompressed forever, because the context of it is, he's having a real one with the audience. The lights are on, so that they can have an honest heart-to-heart, right? That's the framing of it. And he's essentially saying that social media is all performance. It is a constant stream of people performing to each other. Because, we millennials and Gen Zers, we were the ones who were raised on the idea that we can accomplish anything and we're all special. That sort of thing. Which is, just as true now as it ever was. Like, Bo Burnham is talking about his generation. He is much older than me. But, well, I shouldn't say much older. He's like, how old is he? He's in his 30s, I think. So, I just turned 20. So, maybe that's fair. But, I was raised like that. I'm sure Gen Alpha is being raised a similar way. I fear for Gen Alpha just like the rest of us. And, it's this idea that, we were raised to try and... he's basically deconstructing the idea of, fucking Gen Z and millennials, we're all just attention whores and whatnot. We always want attention on social media. When he's like, we were raised to be this way. This is the consequence of how we were raised by the generations that came before us. And this line of, if you can live your life without an audience, do it, rings very true to me. Because I am someone who feels that, I cannot... It's not even necessarily that I want an audience, per se. I do want an audience, obviously. But all I need is a small core fan base that just likes my work. Even though I do, often dream about my work being seen by millions of people. At the end of the day, there is a lot of stress associated with that I'm sure I would not want to deal with. It's more, to me, about the idea of... making it as an artist and needing to make art to survive, and doing that instead of a full-time job that will surely, at least it seems from this perspective, crush me from the inside. But the idea of, if you can live your life without an audience, do it, is that's hard. That is insanely hard, and society isn't built for that. Most people will fail at that job. Even if it is, easier now than ever with YouTube, it is still the 0.0001%. Chances are you won't make it, and at this point I'm far enough along that I can say there's a decent chance I'll make it, but those chances are probably still around only 10, maybe 15% if I'm being generous, right? For most people who maybe haven't spent their entire teenage years honing those skills, that chance is even lower, It's in, 0.01% chance, and a lot of people just don't have the talent, they don't have the skill, they don't have, sometimes it's the intelligence. Unless you're stupid in a very particular way, you do have to be fairly clever to be an artist, I could never do what Bo Burnham does. He has a level of wit that I am envious of. I do think I'm getting funnier with time, but, he's on another level, He was fucking built for this. And he was raised to be a performer. And it's just what he feels he needs to do. The final two songs, the final song of the live show is, he basically talks about Kanye doing this auto-tune sort of ad-lib that was 20 minutes long, just a rant about society and race, and, as he puts it, mostly about his t-shirts not selling. So there's that. But he goes on this, not ad-lib, but instead something very clearly structured, talking about his problems. And the idea behind it is that he's pretending his problems are as simple as putting his hand inside a Pringles can, but the Pringles can is too small. He rants about that for a little bit. And, I already talked about this, but then he does have the real moment of, my mental health is declining. I have so many problems. I will admit, when I saw this song, I was really disappointed by the end of it, because it is the end of the live show, and I thought, like, the end of the actual show, and the rest of it would just be credits from that point forward, or seeing people, like, leave the audience, or something like that, you know? Because the song ends with him no longer being genuine, instead saying, like, oh, you know, just listing off, like, oh, well, if I knew it wouldn't fit, I wouldn't have put on the fucking cheese and the lettuce and all that shit. And I was kind of like, what? Like, that's how you're gonna end it? Fucking why? You know, because on the one hand, it is interesting in the sense of, you know, he's putting on the mask again. He is masking his issues, you know, ending with that. But it feels like, you know, the last two shows, I'm pretty sure, ended, like, so sincerely. Art is Dead is a fucking classic, a banger. And, you know, We Think We Know You. Like, those two are so good. And then to end it on fucking taco ingredients, I felt was just kind of like, bruh. Thankfully, that is not the actual end of the show, at least on Netflix. Because he has a song, I'm just assuming it's called Make Happy, because it's like an encapsulation of the entire show's idea, where he's like, hey, the show's over, you know, rate your experience on a scale of 1 to 10, like, did it make you happy? And he just says that over and over again, like, on a scale of 1 to 2, are you happy? And the final shot is of him leaving his piano in his room, going outside his studio, and meeting presumably his girlfriend at the time and his dog, and just, you know, trying to have a good old time. And it's basically leaving you with the question of, like, okay, Bo Burnham's going to go on from this show and try to make happy, you know, try to make himself happy. Now you do the same. You know, you've had your brief respite. Where do you go from here? And to me, like, infinitely better conclusion. Way better. So glad that song is in there in the Netflix version. Because that previous song, if that really was the ending, I would have been super let down. Because it's a good song, don't get me wrong. Not a show ender, in my opinion. The actual song about, you know, all the themes of the show, wrapping them up in a neat little bow, I think that is a much better way to end the show, and I love that song. This rant is way longer than I wanted it to be. Holy shit. That's your rant. God, I need to cut these shorter. Alright, see ya.